Hello, Palladium fans. I'm here with Kevin, as always, and we have a special episode of the History of Palladium Books. We're going to talk about someone without whom there would be no Palladium Books. And Kevin, let's talk about Julius Rosenstein.
Yeah, so it's actually Julius Rosenstein.
Oh,
Frankenstein. Julius Rosenstein was an awesome human being. People have heard me mention him from time to time. I think I've told the story a million times how there would be no Palladium without Julius, because he's the guy who introduced me into Palladium Books. And I talk about how, he had awful experiences and he finally ran a game special for me and that hooked me. But there's so much more actually to that story and a lot about Julius. And I'd love to tell it, because Sean and I were talking about like destiny and, God and angels and, that kind of thing. And looking back, he and I both have this trail of stuff where it's events and people where it's like, if this didn't happen, if I didn't meet this person at this time, at this event, my life would have been totally different. And Julius is that guy for me. Like if we're doing Back to the Future, that key event that can't change, that erases everything, that I'm fading from the photo, and the whole Palladium staff is fading from the photos because I never met Julius Rosenstein, and he didn't insist that I discover role-playing games. So that's the story I'm going to tell. And
awesome.
It's crazy. So Julius and I were working at an art supply store called Favor Rule, and it was a really awesome store. And Julius was the de facto assistant manager. And we hit it off. We're into lots of the same things, comic books and movies and animation and all that kind of stuff. And I'm one of the salespeople, clerks there. And Julius discovers D&D. And he comes in one day just raving about Dungeons and Dragons. And Kev, you would love this. You've got to play it. This is crazy. You're going to be perfect for it. You're going to love it. And I'm like, it's what? A role-playing what? D&D? And he explains what it is and how much fun he had at his first game. And I'm like, so you like pretend you're someone else, like when you're playing cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers, and one of those like rolls and dice, and it sounds stupid. I don't want to act out some character. I don't want to act in front of other people. It's like, no, you don't have to act. All the typical dumb questions that you hear from role playing people who don't know anything about role playing. I'm saying them, and I'm making all these assumptions, and I'm like, thanks, but no thanks. So Julius doesn't let it stop there. He brings in D&D, tells me to look at it. I look it over lunch, and I'm like, what language is this written in?
It's High Gygaxian. Yeah.
It's, these two little books in a box, and I don't get it. And it sounds stupid. And there's a lot of math. I'm not a math guy. And so I'm like, nah, thanks, but no thanks. And he keeps pushing every time he comes back for one of his adventures, one of his game sessions. He's like, Dev, my character did this and did that. And I'm thinking, that all sounds cool, but it's not for me.
Yeah.
So then Julius decides, well, okay, Kev's a comic book guy. So Villains and Vigilantes came out, and he buys it, I think special to show me. He's a sweet guy. Julius was just an awesome human being. And he brings it in. It's like, Kev, look, a superhero role-playing game. And I'm like, I don't care. He's like, no, Kev, really, you need to play this. And I'm like, and this goes on for probably 2 or 3 months. And I'm like, I don't give a crap about role-playing games. I don't want to play this stuff. So then Like he just won't stop. He's like relentless. So then he says, well, I've convinced half the staff here to play in a game. Benita, who I went to CCS, Center for Creative Studies with, and a couple of other folks there, some of the guys. And it's like, I've got my game master, Johnny Hill. He's going to let you join his game. And everyone seems excited about it. I'm like, all right, I'll play in this game. So we play two game sessions in Johnny Hill's game, and they're abysmal, at least for us, because it's an ongoing campaign. And I think we've touched about this in one of the early episodes. Yep. It's an ongoing campaign. Johnny clearly doesn't want new players. In fairness to him, because I used to think he was a jerk because we felt kind of ignored and unwanted in his game, because we probably were unwanted in his game. Not everyone can run 8 or 10 people, and he already had like 5 or 6 regular players, and then Julius is adding 4 more of us or 5 more of us. That's a handful.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until decades later that all these guys, I'm thinking, well, these guys are like role-playing wizards who've been gaming for years. They had only picked it up like 6 months earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all kind of feeling our way through this. And so we just have an awful time, all the newbies, and part of it was the regulars are doing all kinds of stuff that's just boring as hell. The game master isn't doing anything to involve us or to draw us in. And when there's action, we're like, oh boy, something to fight. You know, one of the established characters, who at this point are like 3rd level, they step in and go, don't worry, little 1st level character. We'll take the damage. I'll take care of this. And you're like, but no, I want to
just
fight.
Wanted something fun.
Yeah. I'm like, please let me fight and kill something. Please. No. It's too dangerous. Which it was, back then in D&D, if you're a 1st level character, if that orc slapped me hard, I'm probably dead. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I get it, but so it's awful. And we're all like, sorry, Jules, role-playing sucks. And he's like, no, let me run a game for you. And I won't go through the whole thing because we talked about it, but long story short, Julius, who had never run a game, by the way, that's the other amazing thing. Julius he was so determined to get me to love role-playing games that he would not take no for an answer. I only playing in this game because I had already written role-playing off. And the only reason I'm even in his stinking game is because the other 4 players said, well, if you don't play, we won't play. And Julius is just this very sweet guy. He's like your classic gamer doof. And I say that lovingly. Yeah. He just kind of came off kind of goofy. And he was like a pun master. He'd always make terrible puns. He kind of behaved like a puppy dog, like this cheerful, happy puppy dog. Kind of bouncy and full of energy. Even though he was super smart, he was a college graduate. But I'm like, fine, I'll play this one game and then I'm out.
Yeah, then I'm done.
We have a wonderful time. Julius is a natural game master. He runs a beautiful game. At the end of the game, we get out of the dungeon and close the doors behind us. We have all this loot. I had a great game. I've got tons of loot. I jingle when I walk. My character jingles when he walks. He's got so much gold and loot and gems. And I'm like, huh. And I open the doors back up and I flip off. I give the gnolls that were chasing us the bird. And shoop, giant-sized arrow. Dead on shot. And Julius is like, how much hit points you got? And I'm like, not enough. And he rolls really high. He rolls boxcars, for damage. And he's like, and I'm dead. And I freak out. And then I go, wait a minute. This game is awesome because there's consequences. I did something stupid. My character died like he should have because he did something incredibly stupid and cocky. I love this. And I usually stop the story there with, and the rest is history. Or I jump to Eric Wojcik and Detroit Gaming Center. But there's more. And because Julius, he went on to introduce me to Eric Wojcik, who brought me into the Wayne Wargamers, where we first started the game. And this is fascinating too. Julius was part of the Wayne. Julius and Eric both went to Wayne State, but had never encountered each other.
Even though they were in like some of the same clubs and activities together.
Exactly. They were in the same, science fiction book club and some other stuff. They never ran into each other. And one day, and this is how Julius discovered role-playing, I find out later, is one day they're on the bus. Just some city bus going wherever the hell they were going. And Eric notices Julius is reading some science fiction novel that Eric loved. And Eric walks up and strikes up a conversation. And they have a nice conversation the length of their bus drive. And they find out they have things in common. And Eric's like, yeah, Julius, you should join the Wayne State Wargamers Club. And Julius is like, what that? He's like, it's a game club. You really like it. And that's where Julius discovers role-playing games. And that's when Julius tries to drag me into all this. And I, kicking and fighting for 3 or 4 months. And that's the point is, it's not just like Julius said, hey, I got this cool game. Why don't you play? And I went, okay. Right. He worked on me and worked on me and worked on me like crazy to play this game. And then Julius and I go on to have this marvelous like 40-year relationship. Yeah. And it was just wild. Yeah. So he introduces me to Eric. In fact, he drags me along to Eric's apartment, which is nearby where we work. And Eric is about to run a game. And apparently Julius had already talked me up as being this great artist. And Eric, who was always kind of a leader, take charge kind of guy, they were looking for an artist to do a T-shirt and create the Wayne Wargamers mascot.
Remember this? Yeah,
it was Otis the Werepig, and they wanted me to draw him up, and so they give me this great description, and I have fun with it, and I do this awesome thing where you got this werepig, humanoid werepig, smoking a stogie, leaning up on his sword, and he's got like a pentacle behind him in a circle. It was a great design, if I do say so myself. And in fact, to my knowledge, they probably still use that to this day. And I do it up. Eric pays me whatever. I'm like thrilled. He goes, "Oh boy, money! Starving artist just made money. It's going to be on a T-shirt, and I get a free T-shirt." Right. And Eric's like, "Well, Kev, we're about to start this game." And I'm like, "Well, I'll leave you alone then." He's like, No, you got to play. And I'm like, I'm still kind of uncertain about playing. Yeah. But there was a pretty girl there, and she seemed to like me. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll play. I don't really remember much of the game, but I met Matthew Ballant in that game. I met Renee Vega, who became a dear friend and helped me out when Palladium was going through the crisis of treachery. I met a bunch of other people there. Johnny Hill was there. He was one of Eric's regular players at the time. And then Eric, of course, drags me into, you should, because at this point, I'm having so much fun in Julius's game, because Julius went on to run a regular campaign. Awesome. With us at work. And which was really fun, lots of fun. Like I said, Julius he was a great player and a great game master. He had a real knack for those things. In fact, he was one of those crazy guys, like so many of you out there, who played in like 3 games a week and ran 1 or 2 games a week. Yep. Plus, he would go to his Aikido classes 2 or 3 times a week. It was just crazy. And but anyways, I meet some of these other guys who would become important people in my life. Like I said, I met Matt Ballant I would then meet Tom and Ken Barthold and a bunch of other guys who would become my Defilers. And as the Wayne Wargamers, they had us playing sort of off campus. There were a bunch of these old houses and buildings that belonged to the university, but were kind of dilapidated. And so our allotted play area was something called the Song Shop. I guess it used to be like a music store on the bottom level, and I think a house upstairs, or God knows what. It was like a 2 or 3 story thing. But it was more like something out of a horror movie, because you had to get to our playing area, you had to like go upstairs, and then you had to go through these corridors where there was all kinds of like wood and boxes and doors, just a bunch of doors. I don't know where the doors came from, doors that weren't on their hinges, just stacked up along this wall. So it just seemed weird. And you had to make this turn through some like big plastic sheeting, and you finally get to your room. And it was just like creepy just even getting there. And so we start playing and I wanted to run something at this point. So we start the Defilers. My Palladium of Desire campaign. So Julius was the very first Defiler, along with Ken and Tom and Tony Falzon.
Now, something you brought up when I was out visiting you last is the Defilers was your first GMing experience, right? Like this epic campaign that went on for multiple years. This was your first time at bat.
Yeah.
And Julius was there.
Yeah. Well, and it turns out I guess I'm a natural too.
Julius saw something.
And I guess he did, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because, we don't know how people see us, and we don't really, I think, see or think of ourselves in the same way that others see or think of us.
No. So,
for example, one day, and this is fairly recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, Kathy always threw a Halloween party at our house, and the neighbors were always welcome. And one of my favorite neighbors, Mike from down the street, he's in the house eating and talking to Alex and Julius, and I'm outside handing out candy and enjoying the multitude of kids. We had a gigantic display, so we'd get like on a nice Halloween, we'd get 500-600 kids, which was awesome. And I came in to warm up, and I walk in, and Mike turns to me and goes, "So Kevin, Julius and Alex tell me you're a genius." And I'm like, "What?" And they're both sitting there just grinning like monkeys. And he goes, "Yeah, they said you're a genius, that you're this great artist, and you're a genius writer and a game designer and a this and a that and whatever a game master is." And I'm like, I don't know if I'd go that far, I said, but thank you, boys. It was like, what? How do you respond to something like that?
No joke.
So, yeah.
But Julius wasn't just a gamer. I mean, he was a gamer, but he play tested everything produced by Palladium. He worked with you at Palladium. The history of the company, like the history of Palladium Books, is the history of Julius working with you.
In many ways, yes.
So what did Julius do at Palladium aside from being your? I'm going to use the term cheerleader. Like, we all need them. We need those people who were like in our lives who are like, you are better than you think you are. Go out there and crush it.
So I left Favor Rule pretty early on to try to become, I was working at being a freelance artist and doing fairly good. And then he and the rest of the Defilers convinced me to start my own company. So, I quit my job to be focused full time on, doing Palladium books.
Yeah.
With, $3,000 in a dream. And of course, he and several other Defilers play tested the mechanoids.
Yep.
And then a couple of years later, I decide that I don't have time to help run the gaming center and do my long-running campaign. The Defiler campaign ran for about 3.5 years. And bear in mind, that's every Saturday except for Christmas, Saturday night, from like 7 at night till 8 or 9 the next morning.
Yeah, whenever you all passed out from exhaustion.
Basically. And, I went on to start Palladium, and Alex Marcinison was my first unofficial employee and helper. And like 8 years later, Favor Ruled Art Supply Store had gone out of business, and Julius was having a lot of trouble finding a job. And I said, Jules, come work for me. And he became my warehouse guy with my dad. My dad was the chief warehouse guy, and Julius was the muscle. And he was a very talented guy, and obviously he's an excellent storyteller, excellent player on so many levels. So he quickly became our proofreader. He proofread every book until his death since like 1989 or 88, whenever he came to work for me. And you'll find his name in, I think, all of the Rifters, including Rifter 85. His name's in most of our books. Yeah. I would bounce ideas off Julius. He'd come up with ideas for sales and things. He contributed articles to the Rifter and to various published Palladium books. He was a pretty amazing guy. I always considered him a true paladin. Scrupulous, if we're going by Palladium stats, he was definitely a paladin with scrupulous alignment. He was just a sweet, humble, silly, goofy guy and the most loyal friend you could ever ask for.
There are some people who may have gotten to play games with him at the open house because he would run a ton of games at the open houses.
Oh, lots of people got to know him and run with Julius over the years. So over the 10 open houses that we've had, Julius would run, I think it was 7 games every weekend. So, it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And Julius would run something Thursday night, VIP night.
Yep.
And then he'd run 2 games on Friday and 2 games on Saturday and a game or 2
on Sunday. And some were played really straight and some were just, Julius was silly. So he would run. He had this long running thing where every open house, it was like an extension of the same group, or at least the same characters, not always the same players. Some kind of thing with the Walker family. Because there's all these characters throughout literature that is a Walker. The last name is Walker. So he'd draw all these things in from comics and literature and stuff. And it was awesome. In films, it was great. He was a great game master, great player. He played. So I went on to run various campaigns for like the next 20 years after I left the Detroit Gaming Center. And Julius always played in every single one of them. He play tested everything we ever did. That's amazing.
He worked for Palladium for 30 years before he retired at like age 70. He was this human calculator. And everyone can add stuff up. Like if I said, okay, 212 plus 532, most people listening to this go, there's the answer. Not me, but most people could do that. Well, if Julius, you'd say, like when we're doing inventory, you'd be like, so we have 13 of these and 239 of those and 563 of these and 1,439 of this. What is that? Answer instantly.
Yeah.
In fact, I would be putting it into a calculator, and before I could hit equals, Julius had to answer. He was phenomenal. But one of the coolest things, because Julius is just this wild guy. I mean, he read tons of comics, books, movies, he had this great memory. In fact, he was sort of the memory of my campaigns, where I'd be telling some story of our campaign, and Julius would say, well, Kevin, that's not quite right. and he would add in something, and I'd be like, I forgot about that. That's right.
You're right. Yeah.
And so, he was just always a blast. He knew a lot of trivia. He probably should have gone on Jeopardy, although he wouldn't know the, pop culture stuff so much.
Yeah.
But old movies and science and literature, in history, he was a killer, right? But he was also an Aikido master.
Yes.
And I do mean master. And this is amazing, because anyone who met him at the open house, Julius kind of walked like Popeye. He had sort of this, bow-legged, oh, I'm Popeye the Sailor Man, and and it was funny because one of my other friends and employee for like the first 10 years or so of Palladium, Jim Ostin, actually went to one of the Aikido exhibitions. And he said, there's Julius, and he's just his goofy puppy dog self. And then he gets into whatever. And he said, he transforms into this thing of beauty. And just so smooth and graceful, because you wouldn't think it was even the same guy. And so Julius was so good. He lived in Detroit, in a rough neighborhood of Detroit. On two separate occasions, like 10 years apart, he was mugged in front of his house, getting into his car with a guy with a knife. And in both occasions, he took the knife away from the guy and sent him running.
You have a story of a time where Julius, you were on the receiving end of a lesson on how effective Julius was with his Aikido. Will you share that one with us?
I am happy to, because it's one of the most memorable events of my life. And I know it'll sound idiotic, but it was just astonishing. So we're still working at Favor Rule, and Julius was just a mere first-degree black belt. He had just gotten his belt. And I was goofing around with him one day, and I come up behind him, and I grab him and put my arms around his neck. And I am teleported to the ground. And I say teleported because I don't remember him grabbing me. I don't remember going down. I don't remember seeing a blur as I'm going to the ground. 1 minute, I'm standing there with my arms around his neck. The next minute, I am on the ground with his knee on my chest and him grinning in my face going, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that. And one of the most astonishing things to me, besides all that, was he did not hurt me. I didn't have a wrenched shoulder. I didn't have a kink in my back. I'm telling you, 1 minute I was standing, and the next minute I was teleported to the ground. Astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. So, it's just, yeah. And that was my friend Julius Rosenstein.
Well, Kevin, thank you for sharing these memories with us. Like you said, he was kind of the hand of destiny in your life. Without Julius, there was no interest in role-playing games. There was no, friendship with Eric Wujik. There was no Palladium Books. It was his constant just kind of pushing at you that altered the course of your life, and which is why we're here now recording all of these things. You got
exactly right. And I think he took great joy in that, by the way. And we've had our trials and tribulations. We've had some really rough times at Palladium. And you could always count on Julius. He was just always there, always a friend, always a hard worker, always willing to come in on the weekend if he needed to and work extra hours or do whatever was necessary.
Yeah.
So, like I said, Julius Rosenstein, Paladin.
That's right. Well, we're not stopping with Julius. We're going to talk about other people who've been very influential in the history of Palladium books who are no longer with us. And I'm looking forward to all of these remembrance episodes that we have lined up. So, Kevin, thank you for sharing these stories.
My pleasure.